All right, testing out this new software. Instead of spending a lot of time making an update for some of our cases, I thought I'd try this out. Seems to work pretty well so far. Um, I thought I'd just give an update. I gave a radio show interview this morning where I on the Tom Roten show, and he's based out of Huntington, West Virginia. And I thought it was a pretty good interview. And he's been doing a lot of coverage on the writ of Mandamus that we filed before the West Virginia Supreme Court, where we are challenging the West Virginia governor's executive orders. And you know, there's only so much time that you can get into in an interview like that, and just kind of looking down at my materials and preparing just refreshing my memory on what we had filed and looking at the current statistics. I mean, it still just blows my mind that I calculated this since the state of emergency was filed in West Virginia by the governor. It's been 129 days as of today. That's 4.2 months, essentially. So when this was first done, it was a declaration that the entire state of West Virginia was a disaster area or was an imminent disaster area. So can you still have an imminent disaster area 4 months in? And especially if you look at all the counties. Now, for instance, in Ohio, now they had a mask order, I believe, today. It's only in certain counties. In West Virginia, everybody gets the mask, no matter which county you're in. And if you look at West Virginia DHHR's website, they have this COVID dashboard, and you can compare different counties as far as which county, how many active cases that they've had, how many deaths they've had. I mean, you can look at my county. We're looking at 5 active cases, 0 deaths after 4.2 months. Summers County next door, 2 active cases, 2 cases at the entire 4.2 months and 0 deaths. Gilmer County, 0 active cases, 0 deaths. Clay County, 4 cases, 0 deaths. Lewis County, 4 cases, 0 deaths. Roane County, 2 cases, 0 deaths. Wirt County, 1 case, 0 deaths. Ritchie County, 0 cases, 0 deaths. Pleasant County, 2 cases, 0 deaths. And I could go on. So you have all these counties around West Virginia where there was no disaster. And although he was able to say that there was an imminent disaster, that it was an imminent disaster area, you can see after 4.2 months, the numbers just aren't showing that. So the language in these executive orders, it's all about disasters, and it doesn't mention a pandemic, but it's about like physical disasters, controlling access to a disaster zone, like a flood or an earthquake. Of course, the executive branch is going to be able to and need to control access in and access out of that area. They could control, who can be in that area and who can't. But now they've taken that and they've applied that logic to the entire state as a whole, even in areas where there really, after 4 months, has been a nominal effect, if any. And they've said, since we can control access to a disaster area, we can control everything in the entire state. So even if you look at all of these executive orders in West Virginia, they all have the same language, that they're allowed to control ingress and egress from a disaster area. So one of the important things that I think people need to realize is that whether or not the legislative branch in a state actually gets off its ass and does its job and stops the governor of a state from acting by himself in a tyrannical manner, whether or not they choose to do that, to do their job, that does not in and of itself amend the state constitution. So just because the state legislature could stop the governor from what he's doing, if they had a supermajority to call themselves into session, that doesn't mean that their failure to do so is some sort of a waiver that waives everybody's rights under the state constitution, that all of a sudden the governor has this increase in executive power. So, and that was the governor's, that was his argument to the Supreme Court. I mean, that was his response in our writ of Mandamus is, well, the legislature, if they really want to, they can call themselves into session. If they're not going to do so, then the governor can continue what he's doing. However, whether or not the state legislature does its job, that cannot increase the amount of power that the governor has under the state constitution. Only a constitutional amendment could do that. So I mean, those are two different things. In fact, there are prior cases, most of the prior cases, where the Supreme Court has found that there's been a separation of powers violation has been when the legislature participated in it. For instance, in one case, the legislature passed a bill that gave an agency of the executive branch, I believe it was the Board of Pharmacy, the ability to basically make up their own misdemeanors. So if a pharmacist screwed something up, they could write these regulations where that pharmacist was guilty of a new misdemeanor. The only problem is that only the legislature has the power to enact new laws, new misdemeanors. So the Supreme Court in that case struck down what the legislature did or tried to do as being a violation of the separation of powers. So you're not even allowed to give away your own power, even if you agree to it. So how can the governor's defense in this case be, well, the legislature is not stopping me. They could if they wanted to. If they wanted to participate, they could. Well, that technically is irrelevant. I mean, it's irrelevant to what the Constitution says. Our Constitution has an express separation of church and not separation of church and state, an express separation of powers. The federal Constitution actually has an implicit one. Ours is express, and it's very plain in our Constitution. So, number one, whether or not the legislative branch does its job, it doesn't matter to the legal analysis. Secondly, let's see. Okay, the face mask order. That's what I wanted to talk about. I've been getting calls all day, or messages all day anyways, of people who had questions about the face mask order, in particular restaurants. Now, Governor Justice, and he was reported as saying, and I can't watch those things, but he was reported as saying that he's threatening to use the local health departments to pull the permits and shut down businesses such as restaurants who do not comply with the face mask law. So is that legal? Well, we may find out, because I'm strongly considering filing a federal lawsuit on behalf of a restaurant who was threatened with a shutdown. And I was contacted by a second one, the only other one I've heard about earlier today. And so there are local health departments in some of these counties that their understanding of the face mask law is that they're allowed to pull the permits and close down restaurants who are not requiring all their staff to wear face masks. Now, if one were to ask them, what is the law? Why am I required? Because that wasn't a law. That wasn't in the West Virginia Code anywhere. Can you show me something in writing about why I have to force all of my family or my employees to wear face masks? They're not able to give you anything other than what the governor has in his on his website, basically in his comeback plan. So in his, if you look on the governor's website, he has a startup plan guide for restaurants. And in there, it requires that all of the employees have to wear masks. And that's pretty much all it says is that it's required. So if you look at the actual executive order itself, Executive Order 5020, and I'm sure I can bring this up on the screen, but I don't really know how to do that yet. But Executive Order 5020, man, maybe I could do that. Executive Order 5020 doesn't actually say that. It doesn't say why. It doesn't say that it's a law, that it's mandated that all employees in a restaurant have to wear a face mask. And it doesn't say why. In fact, if you look at the CDC guidelines, you can go right now to the CDC's website. Maybe I can figure this out. Let's see, share screen. All right, so there's my screen. All right, so there's CDC's website. All you do is go to cdc.gov and you type in food and coronavirus disease. And it's right there, CDC. Currently, there is no evidence to suggest that handling food or consuming food is associated with COVID-19. So coronaviruses like the one that causes COVID-19 are thought to spread mostly person to person through respiratory droplets when someone coughs, sneezes, or talks. So that's the current guidance from the CDC. So if you're a restaurant, you've got the CDC on one hand that says that there's no evidence that making my staff wear a mask has anything to do with coronavirus. And then you have the governor saying that you're going to do it or else I'm going to have the local health departments shut you down. And we don't know who is actually making these decisions. And isn't that exactly the reason that we have elected representatives? I mean, who are we to complain to? Should we call our state senator, our House of Delegates representative? Who are we going to complain to? Because they're being kept out of it as well. So right now, and that's the point of a democratic republic, is that the people don't directly make the decisions because that would be mob rule. But instead, we elect representatives and the representatives make the decisions. And if we don't like the decisions that they made, we can blow up their phones. We can campaign against them. We can elect someone else. We can run for office ourselves. And we know who to blame, who to hold accountable. And I had a quote here that I pulled. Thomas Paine. A body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody. And that's what we have here is it's not even a body of men whom we know. I mean, it's one man with a team that includes czars. And how we started using the term czar in America, I don't know. And why is it a good thing to have a czar over anything? I mean, a czar is nothing but a dictator. And in fact, I would argue that the real czar is our governor. And, you know, what real dictator around the world or a monarch has the power that he's been wielding and will continue to wield until February of 2021? I mean, even the Queen of England is highly restricted. She has to go through Parliament for pretty much anything. Since the Magna Carta, any king of England or queen of England has had to go through Parliament. Our supreme dear leader hasn't had to go through the legislature for anything. There's been, 38 other states, I believe, have had their legislatures meet and enact legislation in response to coronavirus. Ours, just like Kentucky next door, has not been one of them. Now, Kentucky's governor has really gone off the deep end. I mean, he's done some really, really tyrannical things over there. And I just talked to the lawyer Chris Wiest yesterday, and he's the lawyer in Kentucky who has filed several lawsuits over there against their governor, and they've been successful on a couple of them so far. But a lot of what they've had to work with over there has been really more egregious because they had the religious restrictions. And if you're challenging the constitutionality of anything, of any government action, it's going to be easiest to prove your case with a religious restriction, because that implicates a fundamental right. It's a different analysis. Here, with what our governor's been doing, you know, these are like property rights, like the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the right to run a business. Now, we have a fundamental right to pursue a business, to run a restaurant. If the government is going to take away those rights, it can. And really, the only analysis that applies is a rational basis review. So if a court looks at the constitutionality of a government action that affects our business, all they have to prove, all the government has to prove, is that it has a rational relation to some important governmental interest. So safety. So in the interest of safety, they can do all sorts of things. But here is where our case is different, because we've taken a different route. It's my argument that we haven't even gotten to that point yet. We're not to the point where the government has to prove what its rational basis is, because we don't have a law. We don't have a real law. All we have is a piece of paper from the governor who claims it's law, or he uses the word mandate. But, how can it be a law if the legislature did not pass it? A tricameral form of government. The House of Delegates has to introduce the law, the Senate has to pass it, then the governor has to sign it, then it becomes law. So how can we have a law? We can't have a law. And that's why we're taking the violation of separation of powers route. Because if it's not even a law, that's directly in violation of the state constitution. So we don't even get to the point where they can easily prove that they have a rational reason to affect your property in the way that they did. So we'll see what happens with that. The case, the writ of Mandamus case, is currently pending before the Supreme Court, and decision could come down anytime. The last deadline we had was Friday, where both sides had the opportunity to move to disqualify a justice. Neither side did. So we moved past that deadline, and presumably the court could issue a ruling on its own, a written ruling, or they could order additional briefing. They could order oral arguments, and we did request oral arguments. So anything could happen, but that's where this issue needs to be. This is a constitutional crisis. What are the limits of the executive branch's power? And can the governor do whatever he wants just because the legislature is too weak to stop him? Of course not. And that's why we have the judicial branch. So that's why we're seeking judicial review. Now, there are other things that we can do, and that's why I'm looking at filing potentially in federal court, because there are federal claims in addition to the state constitutional claims. And really, right now, the most egregious behavior that I've seen has had to do with these restaurants. And one in particular, I'm drafting a federal lawsuit as we speak on it. I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row with that. And I've heard from some other restaurants. And if you know of a restaurant around the state, or you own a restaurant and they've threatened to shut you down, contact me. And, maybe there's even a third lawsuit that we could do here, a third route to go. But what I've been asking for is get them to put it in writing. They're threatening to shut you down, but they won't put it in writing because what are they going to do? Because they don't even know for sure, because the governor's telling them to do it, telling them that they can do it. But you know what? Here's the thing that's going to happen. It's easy to sue them. They're the ones who are going to get sued. If I have evidence that the governor has directed a local health department to shut somebody down illegally, then yeah, we can sue him directly, easily. But we're not going to have that evidence because he's not going to give them that evidence if it happens. But who's going to get sued? It's going to be the county. It's going to be the actual individual employees who are acting on behalf of the government when they're going and violating people's civil rights. And you absolutely do have a civil right to pursue your own private business. Lastly, the only other thing I wanted to talk about is, speaking of the governor, we have an election coming up. You have a choice between bad and worse, essentially. There is one other potential option that we could have, and that is Delegate Marshall Wilson, who is running as an independent. He's trying to get on the ballot as an independent. But of course, since the two main parties have made the rules, it takes 7,200 signatures just to get on the ballot. So when his opponent is able to limit crowds of 25 or more through his edicts, it's very difficult to get those signatures. So I've been trying to, here locally in Monroe County, get some signatures sent in. If you go to his website, it's Marshall Wilson. You can Google it. Marshall Wilson for West Virginia. On the website, he has the printouts for each county in West Virginia. And if you're a registered voter, you can print it out, sign it, put your date of birth, your address, and you mail it to the address that they have on their website. And I'm sure they don't know exactly how many they have, because you've got people gathering these signatures in every county in the state. So hopefully they have enough, but just in case, make sure, get your signature in. Even if you don't know yet if you're willing to vote for Delegate Wilson, at least you'll have the choice if he gets on the ballot. And I think that if you care about freedom, the Constitution, individual liberties, you will really like him as a candidate. He's a 21-year Army officer, combat veteran. He's been a missionary in South America. He's got 9 kids. He's a history and constitutional scholar. He's a super smart guy. He's strong on the Second Amendment. I believe he's rated A+ by the West Virginia Citizens Defense League. And he's also the main plaintiff in our lawsuit against the governor. So he's definitely willing to step up to the plate and defend the Constitution. So I fully endorse him for governor, and I hope that he gets enough signatures to get on the ballot for the race. So if you live in West Virginia and you're a registered voter, please consider going to his website and signing that petition. If you have friends and family in West Virginia who are registered voters, get them to sign the petition, because, right now, Governor Justice has been basically able to just cruise through, because he changed his party to Republican. He probably can skate through pretty well, but you know what? This is 2020, and nothing has happened as expected so far. So you know what? I have a degree in political science, and yes, I know that a third party candidate is 99 times out of 100 just going to split the vote. But you know what? I think it's worth it this time. We have awful candidates, constitutionally speaking, and we have the best candidate we could ever have, really, in Delegate Wilson. So please get those. I have one here somewhere. Yeah, this is what it looks like. You print off these forms and you just get your signatures and send it in. So I'm sending mine in probably tomorrow, and they have to have the hard copies in Charleston by the deadline. So you can't just get it to them on the deadline. So anyways, that's all I had for this update. And I saw that there was a bunch of comments. I suppose I could have responded to comments, and maybe next time, as I learn how to use the software a little better. But some of the comments are pretty good. But thanks for watching, and pretty sure I had some of my little doodads here that it lets me do that I didn't use. There we go. Hit slide. So I'll put it to my sweet intro as an outro, and until next time.